The house was unusually quiet after the argument. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen seemed louder than usual, a subtle reminder of how empty the room felt. My husband's footsteps had echoed down the hall earlier, his voice sharp with accusations before the front door slammed shut behind him. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the glass of water in my hands, the tension in my chest constricting like a coiled spring. His words still echoed, cruel and familiar. "Why do you always have to be so difficult? What are you trying to prove with those clothes? Don't you realize how embarrassing this is for me?" I exhaled shakily, trying to suppress the tears threatening to spill. This had been the new rhythm of my life for years. Arguments followed by silence, apologies I never truly believed, and promises that things would change. But they never did. In the early days of our marriage, it hadn't been like this. He was kind, patient even. I had been a college student full of life and ambition, studying literature with dreams of becoming a writer. He admired my passion back then, or so I thought. But slowly, piece by piece, I had surrendered parts of myself for the sake of our relationship. I left university because it was too expensive, and what was the point of a degree when we planned to have kids? I stopped wearing the bright red lipstick I loved because he said it made me look like I was trying too hard. My wardrobe changed, and with it so did my sense of identity. The colors faded, both from my clothes and my spirit. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. The sound of footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. Lucas entered the kitchen. His brow creased in concern as he placed his phone on the counter. My son had always been observant, maybe too much so. At 20 years old, he wasn't just any young man figuring out his place in the world. He had an innate ability to sense when something was wrong. "Was it bad this time?" he asked softly, his voice cutting through the stillness. He leaned against the counter opposite me, arms folded across his chest. He hesitated. "It's always bad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't want him to see me like this, broken and fragile. But Lucas had been my rock in more ways than I cared to admit. It wasn't fair. I should be the one protecting him, not the other way around. He exhaled heavily, running a hand through his thick, dark hair. "Mom, this can't go on. You know that, right?" I nodded, but the weight of his words crushed me. How many times had I told myself the same thing? And yet, here I was, stuck in a cycle I couldn't seem to break. Lucas took a step closer, his presence grounding me. "You deserve better," he said, his voice firm. "He's never going to change. You know that as well as I do." Tears welled in my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away. "No, Lucas. I know." For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, like the air before a storm. Then, without warning, Lucas reached for my hand. His grip was warm and steady, and for the first time that evening, I felt like I wasn't completely drowning. "Listen," he said, his tone shifting to something more determined. "You're not staying here anymore. Pack your bags." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "What?" "Pack your things," he repeated, his grip tightening ever so slightly. "We're leaving. You don't need his permission to leave, Mom. I've been saving up, and we can stay somewhere else until you figure things out. But you can't stay in this house any longer." My throat tightened, and I shook my head. "Lucas, I can't just leave like that. I don't even know where I'd go. And what if?" He cut me off, his gaze intense. "I've already figured that out. I have a place in mind, but you'll find out later. Just trust me." The conviction in his voice startled me. He wasn't asking, he was telling me. I had seen glimpses of this side of him before, protective, determined, and ready to do whatever it took to shield me from pain. But this was different. There was a fire in his eyes that told me he had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to finally let him help. "Lucas." My voice wavered as I tried to think of a reason to say no. But deep down I couldn't find one. I was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of waking up every day wondering how much more I could endure. He placed both hands on my shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, you deserve to be happy. When's the last time you did something for yourself? When's the last time you smiled and actually meant it?" I couldn't answer. The truth was, I didn't remember. He nodded as if my silence confirmed what he already knew. "Exactly. So let me take care of you for once. Just this once. You don't have to carry the weight of everything anymore." A sob escaped my lips, and before I could stop myself, I was crying into his shoulder. His arms wrapped around me, holding me close as years of pent-up emotions spilled out. It wasn't just about this fight, it was everything. The sacrifices, the loneliness, the nights spent wondering if this was all life had to offer. When I finally pulled away, Lucas handed me a tissue from the box on the counter. "Go upstairs, pack what you need, and we'll leave tonight." A part of me still wanted to argue, but his confidence was contagious. I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Okay." He smiled, a genuine warm smile that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, this could work. "I'll take care of everything, Mom. You just have to trust me." I nodded again and turned toward the stairs, my heart pounding as I realized what I was about to do. I was leaving, not just for the night but for good. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As I packed, I could hear Lucas downstairs, talking to someone on the phone. His voice was calm, steady, so different from the boy who used to come to me with scraped knees and schoolyard troubles. He had grown into a man, and tonight he was my anchor. I folded the last of my clothes into the suitcase and zipped it shut. Standing in the middle of the room, I looked around, taking in the memories etched into the walls. There had been good times here once, but they were overshadowed by the darkness that had crept in over the years. With a deep breath, I grabbed my suitcase and headed downstairs. Lucas was waiting by the door, keys in hand and a determined expression on his face. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, my voice steady. "Let's go." And with that, we stepped outside into the cool night air, leaving behind the life I had known for something unknown but full of possibility. The taxi ride was quiet, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. I could hear the faint hum of tires against the road as we sped through the city, the soft rhythm almost lulling me into a sense of calm. My suitcase rested beside me, fingers drumming on the handle, not out of nerves but disbelief. Was I really doing this? Had I really just left behind the life I had known for 2 decades? I stole a glance at Lucas sitting next to me. His gaze was fixed outside the window, but I noticed the small smile curling at the corners of his mouth. He was proud of me, I realized. Proud that I had taken this step. And in that moment I felt proud of myself too. He caught me looking at him and grinned. "You okay?" "I think so," I replied, leaning back into the seat. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this." "You're allowed to feel that way," he said, reaching over and giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "But just wait until you see where we're going. You're going to love it." I narrowed my eyes, playful suspicion in my tone. "And you're still not going to tell me where that is?" "Nope," he chuckled, looking like he was enjoying the secrecy far too much. "Just trust me." The mystery was equal parts exhilarating and frustrating. I thought about pressing him further, but his confidence made me think maybe I didn't want to know just yet. Maybe the surprise was part of the adventure. When we pulled up to the airport, the lights of the terminal glittering against the night sky, it all became real. Lucas helped me with my suitcase, effortlessly guiding us through security and check-in, his easy demeanor putting me at ease. I couldn't help but marvel at how mature he was. He handled everything as if this was second nature to him. My little boy wasn't so little anymore. As we boarded the plane and settled into our seats, I tried to distract myself by watching the other passengers shuffle in, stowing their bags and adjusting their seats. But my mind was racing. Where could he be taking me? He had said it was somewhere I'd always wanted to go. And when I thought about the one place that had lingered in my daydreams for as long as I could remember, I couldn't help but hope, just a little, that it was Italy. I had fallen in love with the idea of it years ago, back when I was still studying literature. I used to imagine wandering through cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and sipping wine in sun-drenched cafes. But that dream had slowly faded under the weight of my responsibilities and a husband who dismissed it as impractical. I shook the thought away, not wanting to get my hopes up too high. The hum of the engines grew louder as the plane took off, and I felt Lucas's hand slip into mine, squeezing gently. "You're going to be happy, Mom. I promise." I smiled at him, squeezing back. "I already am." I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, the flight attendants were preparing for landing. I rubbed my eyes, blinking against the morning light streaming through the window. The landscape below came into view. Rolling hills, sparkling blue water, and terracotta rooftops that stretched endlessly. My breath hitched. "Lucas," I whispered, turning to him, my voice trembling slightly. "Are we in Italy?" He grinned, his eyes shining. "More specifically, Sicily." A laugh bubbled out of me, somewhere between disbelief and joy. You remembered. My heart swelled. I can't believe you remembered. Of course I did, he said softly. You've wanted this for so long, Mom. And I wanted to be the one to make it happen for you. I couldn't hold back the tears. They spilled freely as I threw my arms around him, hugging him as tightly as I could. Thank you, Lucas. I don't know how to thank you enough. He held me just as tightly, his voice a warm murmur in my ear. You don't have to thank me. You deserve this. We stepped out of the airport into the golden Sicilian sunlight, the warmth kissing my skin in a way that made me feel alive. The air was fragrant, a blend of sea salt and citrus, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore filled me with an inexplicable peace. Lucas had already arranged for a car to take us to the house he had rented, and as we drove along the coastal road, I found myself leaning out the window, breathing in the Mediterranean breeze. It was everything I had ever imagined, and more. When we arrived, I was speechless. The house was small and charming, its whitewashed walls glowing softly under the morning sun. Bougainvillea vines cascaded down the sides, their fuchsia blossoms vibrant against the pale stone. It sat right on the beach, with a wooden path that led directly to the sand. The waves lapped gently at the shore just a few feet away, as if inviting me to step into their embrace. Lucas grabbed our bags from the car and led me inside. The interior was cozy, with rustic wooden beams, terracotta floors, and large windows that let in the natural light. The living room opened onto a terrace overlooking the sea, and I could already picture myself sitting out there with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the whole month? I asked, my voice tinged with awe as I walked from room to room. He nodded, leaning casually against the doorframe, watching me with a satisfied smile. The entire month is ours. I spun around, tears welling up again as I laughed through them. Lucas, this is incredible. He shrugged, though his eyes were warm with emotion. You've spent so much time taking care of everyone else, Mom. It's time someone took care of you. I crossed the room in an instant, wrapping my arms around him once more. You're the best son anyone could ever ask for, I whispered, my voice cracking. He chuckled, pulling back to look at me. And you're the best mom anyone could ever have. This is just the beginning, okay? We're going to make sure this month is everything you've ever dreamed of. As I stood there in that cozy house, the sound of waves crashing softly in the background, I realized that he was right. This wasn't just a vacation. It was the start of something new. For the first time in years I felt free. Free to dream again. Free to be myself. And I owed it all to him. The sunlight filtering through the terrace windows was warm, casting golden streaks across the room as the sound of waves gently greeted us from outside. I stood by the window, watching the sparkling sea and breathing in the salty air. The view was mesmerizing, like a postcard come to life. I could hardly believe I was here, in Sicily of all places. After so many years of dreaming, it had finally happened. Lucas placed his hands on my shoulders from behind, his touch light but comforting. You're staring out there like the water's calling your name, Mom. I laughed softly, leaning into the warmth of his presence. It is. It feels surreal. Then let's go, he said with a grin, stepping around me. The beach is waiting. I turned, smiling at his enthusiasm, but then I realized something important. Lucas, wait. I don't have a swimsuit. The words came out sheepishly, and I felt silly for not having thought of that sooner. Everything had happened so fast. Packing, leaving, the flight. I hadn't exactly been in the mindset for vacation planning. But Lucas's face lit up as if he had been waiting for this moment. Don't worry, I took care of everything, he said, walking over to the couch and picking up a small, beautifully wrapped package. He handed it to me with that familiar mischievous grin. My fingers trembled slightly as I untied the ribbon and peeled back the delicate paper. Inside was a stunning red swimsuit, the fabric soft and elegant. It wasn't just any swimsuit. It was exactly the kind of thing I would have picked out for myself back when I had the confidence to wear something bold. The color was vibrant, and the cut was tasteful yet flattering. It was as if Lucas knew the version of me that I had forgotten. I blinked back tears. Lucas, it's perfect. My voice wavered with emotion. He shrugged casually, but there was pride in his eyes. I thought you might like it. You deserve to feel good about yourself. For a moment I couldn't speak. It wasn't just the swimsuit, it was the thoughtfulness behind it. The way he had anticipated what I would need before I even realized it myself. I brushed my fingers over the fabric, suddenly worried. But this must have cost you. He cut me off gently, holding up a hand. Mom, stop. You don't have to worry about money. My online business is doing well, and I've saved up enough to make sure you don't have to think about any of that while we're here. I sighed, my heart swelling with gratitude. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Of course, he said, grinning. Now, go change and meet me on the beach. I made my way to the bathroom, my emotions swirling as I slipped into the swimsuit. It fit like a dream, hugging me in all the right places without feeling too revealing. I couldn't help but stare at my reflection in the mirror for a moment, tracing the outline of the bold red against my skin. It had been years since I wore something like this. Years since I felt like I could. But today, standing here in a rented house on the shores of Sicily, I felt something shift. Lucas had given me more than a swimsuit. He had given me a reminder of who I used to be. When I stepped out onto the terrace, Lucas was waiting by the wooden path that led to the beach, wearing swim shorts and a white t-shirt that clung to his chest in the humid air. His eyes lit up when he saw me. You look amazing, Mom, he said, genuine and without hesitation. There wasn't an ounce of embarrassment or awkwardness in his voice, just pride and warmth. I felt my cheeks flush. Thank you. It's been a while since I've worn anything like this. Well, you're pulling it off perfectly, he said, offering me his arm as we made our way to the beach. The sand was warm beneath my feet as we walked toward the shoreline, the waves gently rolling in and out like they had been waiting for us. No one else was around, just the sea, the sun, and the two of us. It felt like we had stumbled upon a hidden paradise, far from the worries of the real world. Lucas ran ahead, tossing his shirt onto the sand before turning around and calling out, "Come on, Mom. Don't make me drag you in." I laughed, kicking off my sandals and stepping into the cool water. The first touch sent a shiver up my spine, but it was refreshing, invigorating. Lucas waded in deeper, splashing water playfully in my direction. "Don't you dare," I warned, but he was already grinning mischievously. With a burst of energy, he dove into the waves, disappearing for a moment before resurfacing just a few feet away from me. His hair was slicked back, water droplets clinging to his skin as he swam closer. "Lucas!" I shrieked as he splashed water at me again, my laughter blending with the sound of the waves. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how I looked or what anyone else might think. I was just happy, free. "You've got to relax, Mom," he teased, floating on his back as the sun glistened off the surface of the water. "This is your time to unwind." I splashed him back, giggling as he pretended to be caught off guard. "I think you're enjoying this too much." He chuckled, swimming closer until he was standing next to me. "Maybe a little. But it's good to see you like this. Laughing, having fun." I wiped the water from my face, my smile softening. I didn't realize how much I missed this. He nodded, his expression sincere. "That's what this trip is for, Mom. To remind you of everything you deserve." We stood there for a moment, the water lapping gently around us, and I felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. Lucas wasn't just giving me a vacation. He was giving me a piece of myself back. As the afternoon wore on, we swam, splashed, and joked around like two kids who had the whole world to themselves. He made funny faces as he floated by, imitated terrible movie lines, and even tried to dunk me under the water, unsuccessfully, much to his disappointment. But through it all I felt safe. Lucas's confidence was infectious, and his presence was reassuring in a way that made me forget all the years of doubt and fear. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow across the water, we finally waded back to shore. The sand clung to our feet as we walked back to the house, our laughter still echoing in the salty air. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed this much. But as Lucas draped a towel over my shoulders and led me back inside, I realized something important. This wasn't just a trip. It was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace it. The air was still warm as we stepped onto the terrace, towels draped over our shoulders, salt clinging to our skin from the afternoon swim. The sky above us was painted in soft pinks and oranges, and the gentle hum of the waves rolling against the shore felt like a lullaby in the background. My hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends, and I couldn't stop smiling. I felt light, like a weight I had carried for far too long had finally begun to lift. Lucas set down his towel on the chair and turned to look at me. His hair was still wet, drops of water trickling down his neck and soaking into his t-shirt. He smiled that same easy, confident smile that had been my anchor all day. "See," he said softly, leaning against the railing. "This is how I want to see you, Mom. Happy." I sat down on the cushioned chair and pulled the towel tighter around me, though it wasn't from the cold. It was from the fluttering warmth in my chest that I didn't know how to explain. "I didn't think it was possible," I admitted. "It's been so long since I felt like myself." Lucas walked over, sitting on the edge of the chair next to me. "That's what we're here for," he said, reaching out to brush a strand of damp hair away from my face. His fingers were gentle, lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. "To remind you that life can be good again." I lowered my gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle in my chest. There was something about the way he looked at me, like I was someone worth saving, someone worth seeing. I wasn't used to it. For years I had been ignored, criticized, made to feel invisible. And now, here he was, showing me a kind of care that felt both comforting and overwhelming. I swallowed, my throat tight with emotion. "You've done so much for me, Lucas. More than I could ever ask for." "You didn't have to ask," he replied, his voice low. "I wanted to. I've seen how much you've sacrificed, how much you've given up over the years. It's time someone did something for you." His words unraveled something deep inside me, and before I could stop myself, tears filled my eyes. I quickly wiped them away, laughing softly at how emotional I had been all day. "I can't stop crying," I said, half joking. "You're going to think I'm a mess." "You're not a mess," Lucas said firmly, his gaze never leaving mine. "You're just finally letting go. That's not weakness, it's strength." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside me, and before I knew it, I was leaning forward, my head resting against his shoulder. His arms wrapped around me without hesitation, holding me as I let the emotions wash over me like the waves on the shore. The scent of salt water and sunscreen clung to him, familiar and soothing. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, his hand gently cupping my face. "You don't have to do anything alone anymore," he said softly. "I'm here." The air between us seemed to shift, growing heavier with something unspoken. His thumb brushed lightly against my cheek, wiping away a tear, and for a moment neither of us moved. I could hear the waves, the distant call of a seagull, but all I could focus on was him. His warmth, his presence, the way his eyes held mine as if searching for something. And then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed or tentative. It was soft, deliberate, and filled with all the care and warmth he had shown me since the moment we left home. His lips were gentle, as if giving me a choice to pull away, but I didn't. Couldn't. The world seemed to fall away in that moment, leaving just us, two people trying to find comfort in a place where life had once been so unforgiving. When he pulled back, his forehead rested lightly against mine, and I could feel the faint rise and fall of his breath. Neither of us spoke at first, as if any words would break the fragile magic of the moment. "Lucas," I finally whispered, my voice trembling. His hand slid down to hold mine, his fingers interlacing with mine. "I know this feels different," he said gently, his voice steady but soft. "And maybe it's confusing, but I don't want you to feel scared." I closed my eyes, breathing in the warmth of the moment, the way his touch calmed the storm inside me. "I don't feel scared," I admitted. I don't know what this means." He smiled faintly, brushing his thumb across the back of my hand. "It doesn't have to mean anything right now. I just want you to feel loved. To know that someone is here, no matter what." My chest ached with emotion, but it wasn't painful, it was freeing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't worried about whether I was doing the right thing or if I was being judged. I was simply here. I opened my eyes and met his gaze, my fingers tightening around his. "Thank you for being here, Lucas." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I always will be." We sat there on the terrace as the sun sank below the horizon, casting the world in a golden glow. The sea murmured softly, and the air carried the scent of salt and promise. As the evening deepened, I realized that this wasn't just about finding comfort or healing. It was about discovering parts of myself that I thought were gone. And as Lucas's fingers remained intertwined with mine, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something I never knew I needed.